All right. Well, Sarah, I can't wait any longer. Why don't you go ahead and tell us what you've chosen as the first book for our book club?
The first selection for the official The Good Food CFO book club is Stolen Focus by Johan Hari. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. This book has had such a big impact on me and the way that I think about running my businesses and how our teams function as a team. And I think just big implications for any founder who truly wants to build a business on their own terms. But before we dive into why I think those things, I want to share a little bit of a backstory. So, a couple of weeks before I picked up this book, I was watching a podcast called Blocks. My husband loves comedians, and I find myself like watching their podcasts with him. And Neil Brennan did a stand up special called Blocks, where he talks about the things in his life that are blocks. They make him feel lonely or isolated or cause him to find sort of his day-to-day life difficult.
Mhm.
And it was a really popular um special. And he started a podcast where he invites guests to talk about their blocks. And I love this podcast because I think it provides an amazing insight into just humanity and humans and how we all are dealing with something as we go through life. And he had Tom Segura on. And if you're not familiar with Tom, he's a comedian as well, successful businessman. And he was talking about one of his blocks being not knowing what he likes. And he
Mhm.
gave this example of being in a store and buying a shirt and realizing that he didn't know if he liked the shirt or if he was buying it because other people would like the shirt. And then he sort of expanded out from there and he was like, I don't know if any of the things that I like wear or buy or have are because I like them or not. And I was stopped in my tracks by this. Like, first of all, he's a successful business person, he's a successful comedian. He appears to have like opinions and like a very clear like idea of who he is externally. So I was really surprised to hear this. And then I was asking myself, how does this happen? This idea of losing who you are and not knowing what you like fascinated me. And it actually occupied a lot of space in my mind for several weeks. That alone was something that I talked to a lot of people about. I talked to my husband about it. I talked to you about it, Chelsea, because it was like, how does this happen? So then when I picked up the book at an airport, I had a really long layover. I was flying from the East Coast back to LA. I picked up the book and I started reading. And it was one of those books where by page 13, I was underlining because things were just really having an impact on me, like right from the beginning. And I want to share something from page 13 of the book that I was underlining like while feverishly while sitting in the airport.
Okay.
So Johan talked about a study of office workers in the United States that found that most of them never get 1 hour of uninterrupted work in a typical day. In fact, most people get a maximum of 28 minutes of focused work in a day.
28 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You say that and that feels shocking. Like my initial reaction is to be shocked by that.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think back to working now, wasn't technically in like an office environment, but even managing a retail store, right? And on my days that were admin days that I was in the office the whole day,
Yeah.
I don't even know if I got 28 minutes of focus.
Yeah. But it gets even more interesting. So he goes on to say that if this goes on for months or years, so in your case, like think of how long you worked at
Yeah.
Starbucks. Okay. If this goes on for months and years, it actually scrambles our ability to figure out who you are and what you want. You become lost in your own life.
Mm-hmm.
Like just needed to stop, needed to pause, and was like, oh, this is how Tom Segura didn't know what kind of shirt he liked. Is this happening to me? Is this happening
Mhm.
to my husband and to my friends? This idea that distraction can actually cause you to lose sight of who you are and become lost in your own life just took, I just was, it just consumed my mind. And I was like, I must keep reading. And he shares in the book that there are signs that you're losing yourself. And I'm going to share these because a couple of them resonated with me. And I think maybe a few will resonate with our listeners and maybe even you, Chelsea, as well.
Mhm.
So he says that you become obsessed with petty goals or dependent on simplistic signals from the outside world. So think things like retweets, likes, shares, right? Those types of things. You lose yourself in a cascade of distractions. So I definitely, you know, from time to time put a little bit too much weight, I think, on the reactions on social media that our business
Mhm.
posts get. But for me, what really hit me was this cascade of distractions sign, because I cannot tell you how many times a day I pick up my phone for a specific use and find myself lost either, on Instagram. And I didn't intend to go there. And after a few
Mhm.
minutes, I think, I don't really know how long I would be, scrolling for, I realized, wait a second, I came here to use the calculator. I'm in the middle of doing something.
Mhm.
And so that was the second point where I was like, worried about that you can get lost in your own life. And now I was recognizing the signs within myself.
Yeah. When I was still with Starbucks, and especially in the last couple of years that I was there, I did become really obsessed with being the best,
Mm,
right? Having the best X window
right.
time, customer experience, rating, like those things.
Yeah.
And when I did not achieve that, right? When I was not number one,
Right.
it was devastating to my identity.
Yeah.
And yeah, does it really matter if we're the fastest, or does it matter if every customer that comes through our drive through feels like we took the time to get to know them and care about them and deliver them a good quality product?
Yeah. I think that's such a great example because it's like you're getting lost in the purpose, right?
Yeah.
What is the real purpose? You are just zeroing in on, and what I'm seeing here is like things that other people
Mm-hmm.
will be able to see that you are number one at, right? Somebody in the next Starbucks down the road may not see or know how great of a customer experience you are giving to every car, but they will see maybe right in the rankings if
Mm-hmm.
your store has the number one speed. So initially, I thought that the author was going to focus on social media alone in this book and how we needed to and can, break our habits. And if I needed to do that to not lose myself or to find myself like whole again, I was going to keep reading.
Mm-hmm.
But while he does spend a good amount of time there for good reason, it is not just about social media. And in fact, he has identified 12 of what he calls deep forces that are damaging our attention. And there are real steps that we can take to reduce the problem for ourselves. And long before, well before he gets into the subject of big tech and how they do indeed manipulate our focus, he discusses things like how multitasking affects our focus, right? We've touched on that a little bit already. That creativity and our ability to remember are affected by multitasking. And he shares studies on the effects of as he calls it, the crippling of our flow states, the rise of physical and mental exhaustion, the collapse of sustained reading. This happened to me as well. And the disruption of mind wandering. And so he talks about how all of these things are also aiding in our losing our focus. Social
Yeah.
media has ramped it up and really accelerated it. But these things have been happening and sort of crumbling or crippling, more and more over time.
What you just said, the crippling of our flow states, right, as a side effect of this. And when you talk about losing yourself, right, and losing the ability to know, like, what do you like or want, or what is your opinion,
Yeah.
that relates so much to being in a state of flow, right? It's something that I myself have been trying or striving to understand for a while now, of how to get back in flow or how to be in flow. And so I find that really fascinating, that that's a
Yeah.
piece of it.
Yeah, and he talks about, so one of the big things that he talks about in terms of technology, right, is like when you omit something from your life, like if it, let's say you're going to, put the phone down to help to as a part of
Mm-hmm.
regaining your focus, you can't just then sit next to your phone, right? Part of it has to be, sort of getting back to these things. And so one of them is getting back to your flow state. And he talks about, what does it mean to be in a flow state? How do you get
Mm-hmm.
into a flow state? Right. And so he's not just saying this is bad, right? These are the things that are wrong with us. He's saying this is how we can get back into it. How
Yeah.
do we avoid physical and mental exhaustion, the collapse of sustained reading. I mean, this is why I recommitted myself to reading one book per month,
Yeah.
because it is a very grounding experience for me. He talks a lot about the science of like physical active reading and your
Mm.
eyes and just
Mm-hmm.
like the physical benefits of that. And you actually get that also from watching like long format TV shows, which is great for some people who maybe don't love to read. And he goes into the book about that and how that differs from like the fast pace of change in social media. It's really, really fascinating.
Yeah.
But thinking back through my career, thinking about hustle mentality, thinking about mainstream business media, right? They all promote the destruction of what we learn in this book are very important to our focus and ultimately knowing who we are and what we want in our lives. And so the reason that this book is the first choice for the book club is because we're asking people, or we're working to support people in building a business on their own terms. And if we don't know who we are and what we want, we cannot do that. And so I just think that it's such a powerful book and such a great place to start for so many people,
Mm-hmm.
myself included.
I'm definitely excited to read it.